No meeting with Vladimir Putin. President Trump heads to Argentina for the G20 Summit. His former lawyer pleads guilty to lying in the Russia investigation. On hold, a standoff among lawmakers leaves nearly 24 of the president's judicial nominees in limbo. We're on Capitol Hill. The scourge of addiction, how the Vatican is trying to help those who are struggling. And 'tis the season. Iconic Christmas trees light up the East Coast.
3, 2, 1.
Including some crooning Catholics from Michigan. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, November 29th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump is calling his former personal attorney a proven liar. Michael Cohen now admits he gave false statements to Congress about the work he did on a Trump real estate project in Russia. The revelation came as President Trump left for the G20 Summit in Argentina. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The G20 brings together global leaders, but President Trump has canceled a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin and says a packed schedule won't allow him to connect with the Saudi crown prince. The president could be working on a trade deal with China, but in the meantime, don't expect him to mend fences with his former lawyer.
He's a weak person, and what he's trying to do is get a reduced sentence. So he's lying about a project that everybody knew about.
The president's ex-lawyer, already awaiting sentencing for 8 federal crimes, now admits he lied to Congress about plans to construct a Trump Tower in Moscow. Michael Cohen originally said building discussions ended in January 2016, but they actually continued until June of that year. President Trump says the potential Russian project ended before his presidency.
I was allowed to do whatever I wanted during the campaign. I was running my business, a lot of different things.
His attention now turns to the G20 Summit and the spotlight on a potential trade deal with China.
I think China wants to make a deal. I'm open to making a deal. But frankly, I like the deal we have right now.
The president claims billions of dollars are pouring into the U.S. because of the trade tariffs he's charged to China. And he changed his position on a possible G20 meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Trump is upset that Russia fired on and seized 3 Ukrainian vessels and their crews over the weekend. Soon after leaving the White House, he tweeted, "Based on the fact that the ships and sailors have not been returned to Ukraine from Russia, I have decided it would be best for all parties concerned to cancel my previously scheduled meeting." The president also says scheduling conflicts won't allow him to meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The Saudi leader has been accused of directing the murder of U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Earlier this year in Argentina, an interfaith forum held in relation to the G20 took place. In a message to participants, Pope Francis cautioned people of faith about indifference toward difficult situations that affect neglected and forgotten people. We'll see if the Holy Father has more to say to world leaders as the 2-day G20 summit begins tomorrow. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. A standoff in the Senate. The Judiciary Committee cancels votes on more than 20 judicial nominees. It's a task Republicans hoped to accomplish during this lame duck session. Senator Jeff Flake is insisting GOP leaders first schedule a vote on a bill to protect special counsel Robert Mueller. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi details what's at stake. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Senate Republicans have the power to help President Trump make a lasting impact on the nation's courts. It's their job here to confirm judges to lifetime appointments. They do need Senator Flake's yes vote, but the retiring Republican from Arizona has an ultimatum.
My commitment to not vote for judges before the committee or on the floor until we get this done stands.
Senator Jeff Flake demands the Senate vote to protect special counsel Robert Mueller. He's investigating the Trump campaign and Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. Without Flake's support, the Judiciary Committee canceled their meeting today. They were scheduled to vote on 22 district and appeals court nominees. Flake made his pledge after President Trump forced out Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. The president replaced Sessions with Matt Whitaker. He's been critical of Mueller's investigation. The Senate Majority Leader calls Flake's request irrelevant.
This is a solution in search of a problem. The president's not going to fire Robert Mueller.
Yesterday, the Senate was split in the vote to advance District Court nominee Thomas Farr. The vice president broke the tie.
The vice president votes in the affirmative, and the motion is agreed to.
All Democrats oppose Farr.
Republicans want to stack the court with judges who will do their bidding.
The conservative nominee supported North Carolina's bathroom bill. It required people in government buildings to use the bathroom and locker room of the sex listed on their birth certificate.
Mr. Farr was also the lead lawyer in defense of North Carolina's insidious voter ID law, which the Supreme Court ruled, quote, targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision, unquote.
Actually, the Supreme Court decided not to hear that case. An appeals court concluded that the voter ID law targeted African Americans. Today, the full Senate delayed Farr's final confirmation vote, but next year, Republicans will have more power with 2 extra Senate seats. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says all groups fighting in Yemen's civil war will come to the table for peace talks next week. But overnight fighting has diplomats around the world worried if they can agree on a ceasefire. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby has more from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Peace talks to end Yemen's nearly 4-year civil war up until now have repeatedly fallen through. But this time, the United Nations says they're close to having everything in place. Their goal? To stop the bloodshed.
Despite talks of peace, there are no signs of an end to the fighting in Yemen. The war pits a Saudi-led coalition against Iran-aligned Shiite rebels, known as Houthis. Both sides claim to be for the people, but the fighting has led to widespread food shortages. The UN Food Agency estimates as many as 12 million Yemenis are just one step away from famine. Secretary General Antonio Guterres says it's crucial both sides are at the table.
If we are able to stop the Yemeni war, we will be stopping the most tragic humanitarian disaster we are facing in today's world.
Guterres notes tens of thousands are believed to have been killed. Back in Washington, senators are questioning why the U.S. military is backing the Saudi-led coalition.
There's really no reason to be involved in this civil war any longer, other than some vague notion that the Saudis are our ally. But how can you call a country an ally that lies to your face?
We are fighting a war in Yemen that we haven't declared, that has never been declared or authorized by Congress. That's not constitutional, and it would be wrong for us to do nothing about it.
In a bipartisan 63-37 vote yesterday, the Senate opted to move forward with legislation calling for an end to the U.S. involvement in the war. Many senators want to punish Saudi Arabia for its alleged role in the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Secretary Mike Pompeo says the resolution is not good in the long run.
And so it is the view of the administration, Secretary Mattis and myself, that passing a resolution at this point undermines that. It would encourage the Houthis. It would encourage the Iranians. It would undermine the fragile agreement for everyone to go to Sweden and have this discussion.
Regardless of the Senate's vote, diplomats here are still moving forward and planning for next week's peace talks. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert says their focus right now is in supporting Martin Griffiths, the UN Special Envoy. Griffiths has been in touch with both parties. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. 3 police officers in the Philippines are found guilty of murdering a 17-year-old. It's the first conviction from the ongoing war on drugs. Officers were sentenced to 40 years without parole. The teen was found dead last year following a drug raid. Stop negotiations with Beijing. That's a message from 86-year-old Cardinal Joseph Zen, retired Bishop of Hong Kong. He is stepping up his rhetoric on the Vatican-brokered provisional deal with China about who appoints bishops in that communist country. In an interview with the French Catholic publication La Croix, Zen says the Bishop Emeritus of Hong Kong says, quote, the Pope didn't get anything from this agreement. It's a fake, an illusion, and Beijing made him lose his authority. Zhen is an outspoken critic of the Communist Party in China, and he has been on our program. Joining me now is Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. Welcome back to our broadcast.
Great to be with you, Lauren. Thank you.
You say that Cardinal Zhen might be getting it a little bit wrong. He says the Vatican is betraying the faithful. You write in the National Catholic Register that the Vatican could have been betrayed.
Well, I think both could have happened. And I think that the Vatican may have been very gullible and had some very bad advice. One of their main advisors on China, the leading voice in the American Catholic Bishops' Conference on China, was Archbishop McCarrick. And he had been to China 8 times. We don't really know whom he traveled for, but we do know he stayed with the government-appointed bishops, the patriotic communist bishops, every time he went.
Archbishop McCarrick is the bishop who is under charges for sexual abuse and is now living in, I believe, a monastery in Kansas. You know, Cardinal Zhen also says that the Vatican is helping the government to annihilate the underground church that, quote, Beijing was not able to crush. I think you two agree on that.
We do agree. We agree on almost everything. Yes, they've arrested 4 priests since the agreement was signed 2 months ago. It's only been 2 months. 4 priests have been
of the underground church.
Of the underground church have been imprisoned, detained. A bishop has been detained. They have sent for re-education in a re-education session. Several priests. They've destroyed 2 popular Marian shrines. This is all since this agreement was signed.
And you know, I think that this article yesterday in Asia News also brings this to light. There's a priest who says that the Holy See should concern itself with bishops who are in prison.
Yes, there's a bishop there that's been there for 20, 30 years. There's a priest that was there, been in prison. We don't know his situation, whereabouts, for 3 years. And they got nothing. The Vatican got no information on these cases since
So it seems like it's a lopsided deal in your mind.
It's a lopsided deal, but Cardinal Zhen says something very important. It undermines the authority of the Vatican, and it undermines their teaching authority because it essentially hands over to the Beijing, to an avowedly atheistic government, what the church should be saying and doing.
Before we go, I want to turn to Asia Bibi, the Pakistani Catholic woman who recently was freed after serving 8 years on death row for blasphemy. What do you know about that case?
Well, she was acquitted on October 31st and had to be put into hiding for her own safety. So she is effectively under house arrest now, and I got word from church sources close by her, that not in Pakistan but involved in the case, that the case is paralyzed.
Why?
People, governments are afraid of reprisals.
To take her. They don't want bombings, terrorist bombings.
Yes, and I think it's unwarranted fear, but that's what they are.
So what will happen? They're still negotiating, I would imagine, with different countries.
Yeah, I'm hoping. So we're going to keep it alive, and thank you for raising it on the show today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Nina Shea, director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. Thank you, as always, for coming on our broadcast. A new study from the Centers for Disease Control says the life expectancy for Americans continues to decline. It's now 78.6 years. And if you take a look at 2014's numbers, it was 78.9 years. The suicide rate is the highest since at least 1975, with 14 deaths per 100,000 people. And last year, drug overdose deaths rose by nearly 2% compared to 2016. So, what can be done about this? Hundreds of experts are gathering at the Vatican this day, the next day, to look at addiction prevention. And the focus, drugs, pornography, and gambling. Pope Francis often condemns the drug trade and its impact on society. Joining us now from Rome is MC Sullivan, Chief Healthcare Ethicist at the Archdiocese of Boston. Welcome to our broadcast, MC.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for having me.
Addiction is a horrible, horrible thing to affect families. Recent stats say 240 million people worldwide depend on alcohol. 5% of the world population has tried drugs at some point. How is this conference addressing this problem?
Thanks. It's a great question, and I wish there were an easy answer that we would come away with some kind of magic wand, or you should forgive this example, a magic pill to treat the problem. But the conference is meant to do two things. So the first thing that we're trying to do at this conference is get to know what the other people around us know. We're hearing a lot of data, a lot of it science-based. We're also hearing about a lot of intelligence on the ground. We're learning, for example, that there are new products, new kinds of drugs that we have to combat, added to the already daunting problem of what has been in existence for a while. We're learning that there are new trafficking routes. We're learning that there are new target constituencies for some of these new drugs. So we're trying first and foremost to educate each other.
Right. The conference is also looking at pornography. I want to talk about the dangers of that. Starbucks today actually announced that they are going to be blocking pornography from stores. How does this hurt families? You know, everybody says that pornography is a problem, but no one's willing to have the conversation about it.
That's right. And I think it's because we're afraid to kind of give it a name. So I think the problem with pornography, if I want to be very simple and straightforward about it, and I think we have to start by being simple, straightforward, no need for elaboration, and no room for misunderstanding. The problem with pornography is that it objectifies us. It turns us into things rather than people. And the impact for that, the consequence of that, is that relationships are not healthy. And if you do not have healthy relationships in a society, in a family, in a community, in a faith community, you have nothing.
You talked about science, you talked about sharing new information about drugs, but when it comes to the evil of it, what is that being discussed?
Mm-hmm. It is being discussed, and it will be discussed more in depth tomorrow when we talk about best practices from people like myself who work in various programs. I don't work in a program against pornography, but as you can imagine, in the work that I do for the Archdiocese of Boston, I have many conversations about it. We talk about organizations around us that have started to put blocks, kind of like parental blocks, such as the one you described from Starbucks. Universities are having these conversations. Catholic universities are having these conversations. So I'm very much a part of the assessment of what the problem is and how we as a church, faith-based community, can best respond to it. And one of the interesting things today has been to hear scientists and social scientists and clinicians talk about the need for religion and spirituality in these conversations and in these programs.
I wish we could continue to talk about this longer. Thank you for all that you do, MC Sullivan, Chief Healthcare Ethicist for the Archdiocese of Boston.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, author Ryan Anderson defends his views on the transgender debate and why Sister Jean Schmidt is ready to ring in the new basketball season. Blessed John Henry Newman is one step closer to sainthood. The Vatican reportedly approved a second miracle attributed to the English cardinal. Newman was an Anglican priest and theologian who converted to Catholicism in 1845. He was beatified in 2010 by Pope Benedict XVI. An opinion piece published in the New York Times takes aim at conservative views on the transgender movement. The author of the op-ed, who is undergoing surgery to become a woman, accuses conservative Ryan Anderson and others like him for engaging in, quote, compassion mongering and peddling bigotry in the guise of sympathetic concern. Joining me now by Skype from the Heritage Foundation is Senior Research Fellow Ryan Anderson, also the author of the book When Harry Became Sally. Ryan, welcome back to our broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
Andrea Long-Chu has some pretty harsh criticism of you. You say it's misrepresenting your work. How so?
The purpose of the book is to say people with gender dysphoria, people who identify as transgender, they're really suffering. They're not making it up. They really do feel a sense of alienation from their own bodies. But the problem isn't with their body. And so the solution isn't cross-sex hormones or sex reassignment surgery. We need to find better ways to help people feel comfortable in their own bodies. without denying that they're currently feeling very distressed. It's a very real phenomenon.
Okay, let's talk about gender dysphoria. That is the distress a person feels when their gender doesn't match who they feel they are inside. The author disagrees with you that it is a clinical delusion and that gender reassignment surgery is a violation of medical ethics. Explain to us your reasoning about why it's a violation.
Sure. I mean, the basic idea here is that medicine isn't just about satisfying the desires of a customer. Medicine is about bringing wholeness and healing. And it's not wholeness and healing when you try to do something that's impossible, when you try to turn a man into a woman or turn a woman into a man. This is turning medicine upside down. And in the op-ed, Shue argues that just because I want it, that's reason enough for a doctor to perform this surgery on me.
How does the dignity of the human person play into this issue? What is your solution, Ryan?
So the solution here is to take seriously what Shue says about the sense of discomfort, the inability to feel at home in one's own body. But the solution isn't changing the body. The solution is trying to identify what those underlying causes of the dysphoria is and how to help someone reconcile their identity with reality, their identity with the reality of their own body. That's what respects the dignity of that person, the dignity of that person created male or female.
Ryan Anderson, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation and author of the book, When Harry Became Sally. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
The Loyola Chicago men's basketball team gives Sister Jean Schmidt, its 99-year-old chaplain, a ringing endorsement.
I'll probably gain 5 pounds by having this on my finger now.
I just love her. How can you not love her? She was given a ring in honor of the Ramblers reaching the Final Four last season. It was the team's first trip to the semifinals since 1963. Sister Jean gained fame by praying for Loyola and its opponents. Up next, a Christmas tradition more than 500 years old in Germany. And festivities begin in New York City and in the nation's capital. Imagine your Christmas market that you go to every year has been around since 1434 and was founded by an emperor. Well, that is the case for the Dresden-based Streiselmarkt. It took its name from the traditional streusel cake. Hundreds came yesterday to ride the carousel and the Ferris wheel and to eat and be merry. And it's not just in Germany where that's happening. Christmas is in the air here in the United States as well, with the lighting of 2 of the country's most popular trees. Here in Washington, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
3, 2, 1. Merry Christmas. Thank you.
President Trump and the First Lady flipped the switch on the decked-out spruce just south of the White House. This makes 96 straight years for the presidential tradition.
Please welcome our very own caroling angels.
The angels are the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist of Ann Arbor, Michigan. They sang Carol of the Bells.
Gaily they ring while people sing, telling the world Jesus is King. Ding dong ding dong, that is their song, with joyful ring, all caroling.
In New York City, a 72-foot Norway spruce lit up outside Rockefeller Center. It's decorated with 5 miles of LED lights and has a 900-pound Swarovski crystal star on top.
It was magical. I came all the way from Florida for this, and it was amazing. It was everything.
I think it's awesome because it's like a really big tree and a lot of ornaments, and it looks very decorated.
Well, it could have actually been a turkey too, right? But I think those were Christmas lights. At the Vatican, the Christmas tree is going to light up 1 week from tomorrow, Friday, December 7th. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.